Hi Wild Things, I'm back for a track reaction to Doing Better, which is the track that Fletcher just dropped today. It is the 1st of March here in Australia. And I have the lyrics open out in front of me, and I want to tell you some really cool things that I'm seeing in the song, and why I think there's things that are really smart, and how she's kind of like maybe building on some things that I might have alluded to in my last video, and talk a little bit about the track. I think this will be a little bit of a shorter video, just explaining what I see here. And then I think I will do a second video, a longer video, talking about Antidote, the album, big picture, and what the album storylines look like they're going to be, and like, yeah, some of the kind of cool stuff that I can see Fletcher Easter egging with the way she's gone about this rollout. But if you want to know my thoughts on Doing Better so far, stick around. Okay, so when it comes to the first verse is actually written in a really, really clever way to generate some double meaning that I really, really, really enjoyed. And the way that she does that is by talking in a way where it's like almost like self-deprecating, in the sense of like she's trying to paint herself as the villain, essentially. But the thing about the way that she's painted herself as the villain in the first verse is that obviously there's a lot of like bee symbolism associated with her previous relationship. And if you know anything about bees, then you would know that kerosene is a product that irritates them and encourages them to sting, while the smoke created by lighting fires is what calms them so that you don't get attacked by bees. And so the way she's written it, like on a surface level, is like very, I'm the villain. But like when you think about the deeper symbolism of her referring to her ex as having kerosene in her mouth while she's the one lighting fires, the deeper meaning of the verse is that, you know, she was kind of doing this thing that seemed hurtful, but actually it was going to calm them both and stop them from stinging each other, because I do think, you know, kind of sounds like they're in a bit of a toxic dynamic, and I do think they're probably hurting each other a lot. And so while she was the one to pull the pin, like, I think ultimately it was a service to both of them. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think the way she did that was so clever, like kind of the juxtaposition between kind of like painting herself as the bad guy that's kind of like burning everything down and like destroying everything, but actually her being the one that creates the smoke that calms the bees, because, you know, as far as I can tell, I think they were both hurting each other a lot towards the end of that relationship, and yeah, like I think it was doing them both a service to ultimately part ways from each other, and like as snarky as it kind of sounds for her to be like, drove you far away and dropped you off at her house, at like her new girlfriend's house, like that's kind of nice at the same time, like being like, you have the opportunity to move on now instead of like staying in a toxic dynamic with me. Like, and I think this is like one of the things about like relationships ending. Like a lot of the time I think you can get really hung up on like all the things that you think you did wrong, and like all the things that you're like, oh, I'm like, I did this toxic thing or that toxic thing. And I think in Carrie's case, it's like being a little bit self-destructive. But at the end of the day, like when you look back at it with 2020 hindsight, like actually that relationship ending was, you know, what was best for everyone, big picture. And like they both needed to go, they both needed to move on, they both needed to go like experience relationship with other people and learn some different things and like grow and like maybe in like be with people that are more compatible, and that aren't going to, you know, aggravate each other in the way that Carrie and Shannon clearly aggravate each other. They clearly antagonize each other. They clearly make each other like a lot worse a lot of the time, not better. Like clearly they were not good for each other and they needed to part ways. And as much as at the time in relationships, sometimes you can kind of feel like either the villain or the bad guy, or feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with you that's causing the relationship to end. And you can almost like wish that you weren't that way. Like I've been there in relationships, like in my last relationship, I've been there where I'm like, I wish I wasn't like this. I wish I didn't need to be accommodated the way I need to be accommodated as an autistic person. Because it feels like I'm being destructive in this relationship because I'm getting so neurotic and I just need things. And I just wish I didn't need them. But then like looking back at it, 2020 hindsight, I'm like, she was just not the bitch for me. You know what I'm saying? Like the right person will be able to accommodate you, and you won't feel like you're, wrong or bad for the way that you are. So like on one level, Carrie's like painting herself as like the destroyer, the villain in the relationship. But I think like on another level, like when you really think about what the consequence is, if like someone's got kerosene in their mouth as a bee and they're a stinger, like, it's also like actually like, in the moment you can feel like the villain, but, in the long run, like actually you were the good guy to like, kind of like draw the line in the sand and be like, this isn't good for me. This isn't good for you. Like this is bringing out the worst in both of us. And, now you've got this bad taste in your mouth that essentially from a place of hurt is like making you sting me and make it worse. Like that's like a very self-destructive toxic cycle, like kind of hurting each other. And then from that place of hurting each other more, you know what I'm saying? Like that's essentially what this kind of verse seems to be painting a cycle of, just like a lot of hurt and kind of making things worse rather than better. So like it's like a very clever way to kind of like be talking about two things at once, like feeling like the villain in the moment, but actually doing both people a service in the long run, in the sense that like, you're creating the smoke so that the bees can calm down and stop stinging each other, which, hopefully one day we'll see that actually happen, come to fruition. Girlie's a manifester in her songs. So, like I think, hopefully this manifests the bees leaving each other alone to stop stinging each other, because they're just bad for each other. And like, yeah, I just don't think that they can really be around each other without antagonizing each other. So I don't know, like I think the verse was just very well written, and just like very clever in the way that it, was like put together to like say more than one thing at one time. The other thing I like about the first verse of this song is it immediately drops you into the timeline that this song is talking about without Carrie actually having to say, this is when this song is about. You know what I'm saying? Because essentially, like, she's able to transport you back to when Becky's So Hot and Sting were dropping by including references to both of those songs in the first verse. So obviously the kerosene in your mouth reference is about Sting, and then the drove you so far away, I dropped you off at your house reference has to do with like Becky's So Hot and like the riding shotgun line. So literally without her having to say a word of like when this song is supposed to be like kind of starting or taking place, you immediately know when the song is starting and where it's taking place and the time period that it's referring to. So the first verse really sets the scene in a very clever way, and I would say that that seems to be the point of the first verse, is just to make it like super, super, super clear the context of the song and like kind of the narrative, the timeline in which the song is taking place, because basically the rest of the song is really not about what the first verse is about. The song kind of like takes a turn and is much more about Carrie's like sense of personal fulfillment, and like the things that she was working towards from maybe more of an ego place that she thought would make her happy, but then turns out that it doesn't. And so the rest of the song's really not about relationships necessarily. It's more about Carrie personally and how she feels about, her career and like, where she's kind of going in life and where she's getting a sense of fulfillment from. And if she's growing in the direction that she actually wants to grow in. So the first verse is a bit of an anomaly in that sense. Like, it really doesn't fit with what the song's actually about, but I think it was so, so, so important for it to set the scene. And for like, to create kind of like a kicking off point in terms of like the point in time in which Carrie started to question whether, she was kind of like on the right path, let's say. Because based on how the story turns out, I do think it's important for people to know that like all of this questioning around like what's actually aligned, what's actually fulfilling, was already kind of like well underway during the Becky So Hot era. And this was how Carrie was feeling after the Becky So Hot era, before, there were any extra pressures or any extra kind of like, other things that are of a very similar nature happening in her life that maybe pushed her in a particular direction towards maybe things that were more aligned and more personally fulfilling. Because personally, I wouldn't want anyone to think that Carrie was making any decisions about her life for reasons other than, Carrie, what feels right and true and aligned for her. Like, I don't want anyone to think that, some of the things that happened after the Becky So Hot era that might have like been in a very similar vein in terms of like maybe making her feel a very similar way, because, it was kind of patterns repeating themselves. I don't want anyone to think that, she made a decision for anyone else. Like, this is clearly a decision that was well on its way, like during the Becky So Hot era, based on how, that era made her feel, and kind of like the forces that were, enabling what happened during the Becky So Hot era to happen, and then those same forces enabling what has happened since that is of a very similar nature, in the sense of like, some things were done to like make Carrie a lot of money and be viral and be famous. Some patterns have repeated themselves, but that doesn't mean that just because she's made a decision now to change some things, it doesn't mean that, that kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back is the reason. Like, all of this was going on for a long time before the straw broke the camel's back. You know what I'm saying? Like, before she like pivoted towards things that are more personally fulfilling and more aligned and things. Like, I think it's just really important that people know that this misalignment was like happening for a long time before Carrie made some decisions to kind of change her path, change her trajectory towards things that feel more, aligned and true and self-honoring and like self-respecting, and, just, I think that's important to note. That probably sounded really elusive, and I swear I'm not trying to be elusive. I'm just trying to be tactful, because this is obviously like not my news to share. So I'm just like trying to be mindful of the way that I'm approaching this. But, I think for the sake of clarity, I'm just going to say that obviously I'm talking about the same thing that I was alluding to in my previous video in the Lead Me On reaction. And that this song is very clearly alluding to. And you know what? Like, Carrie has as good as said that she's quitting her job. Which is basically, what this song is very clearly about, that, the way that business operates is like not necessarily for her. It's not aligned with her. And while it might, do the thing of like making you really viral and famous and like make you lots of money, that's not necessarily aligned with her. And, some things are going to shift. And, like, I just feel like for the sake of clarity, I'm just going to say that that's what it is, and that's what this song is about, because I think it's just going to make the rest of the video easy. Because if I'm trying to be too tactful, I just don't think I'm going to be able to explain like what this song is actually about in a clear way. So, may as well just say it. And so, like, essentially what I was just rambling about was like, I don't want people to think that Carrie like quit her job for me or anything, like, because that's literally not what happened. Carrie, had a, moment, I'm sure, that I was involved in that kind of like maybe made some things a little bit clear, but like like everything was already in the works. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think we had like a very tense moment because of, that kind of misalignment with her own kind of career, and the kind of direction things were heading, and whether or not that was actually fulfilling for her. But that really wasn't about me. That was really about, her and her alignment, and, whether that was fulfilling or not. And that had already existed for a long time before I came on the scene. That tension was already evident in the Becky So Hot era, based on how she felt during the Becky So Hot era, after the Becky So Hot era. Maybe the situation with her and I might have created a bit more clarity around the situation, but or maybe more of a push to move towards that clarity. But I think she was already there. You know what I'm saying? I don't think I necessarily had anything to do with it, really. It was already kind of in the works. But anyway, moving on, this brings us to the pre-chorus, which is low-key giving tea, because, one of the main arguments for Shannon and against Carrie, back in the Becky So Hot era, was that, Shannon's moving on and Carrie's staying obsessed and pressed and, whatever. But, I think based on how everything's turned out, and maybe what Carrie's alluding to in these pre-choruses, that maybe that, argument never held any water. You know what I'm saying? I think that really was never the case. You know what I'm saying? Because it seems like she's implying that, Shannon might have kept her number in case she needed to check in. But, based on how everything panned out, it kind of feels like maybe that wasn't the vibe. You know what I'm saying? Especially given that, for Becky's birthday, Shannon was posting I'm so glad the universe brought me you. But then in her Now This Is Summer playlist, she's adding songs about still being in love with her ex. You know what I'm saying? I kind of feel like maybe the Shannon's moved on and Carrie's staying pressed and obsessed story was, never held any water. I'm just going to say that. I just don't think that, was an accurate assessment of what the actual situation was. And, kind of seems like Carrie's implying that she was right. You know what I'm saying? That, Shannon was checking in and maybe not checking in for a very amicable exes kind of situation. Maybe there was, some other, motives involved potentially. And, that happened. By the sound of the song, it seems like it at least happened in September and December. But yeah, that's why the pre-chorus is giving tea. And I just hope that, if there was some checking in, that Becky knew that there was some checking in. And even if it was maybe made out to be a bit more innocent than what it was, I hope at the very least Becky was fully clued in and just was not in the dark. Because if she was in the dark, I'll be a little bit pissed off. I'm not going to lie. I've always been Team Becky. I didn't take any sides necessarily in the Becky So Hot era. I saw some things on both sides, which I made very clear in my TikTok videos. I wasn't trying to take sides, but I definitely was, advocating for Becky as much as possible, because I think that was the fair thing to do. But anyway, I don't think we'll ever publicly know exactly what Carrie's talking about, but I'm just saying that that's the implication. Trust me, I'll be asking, but I just don't think that will ever be public information, exactly kind of what the back and forth was. But yeah, that's just kind of the vibe that I'm getting personally. But who knows? I'm not saying I'm 100% correct. That's just what I'm picking up. And if you're picking up something else, great. But if you're picking up what I'm putting down, great. Who cares? We don't know. I'm just kind of just saying what I think and really not thinking about anything other than that. You know what I'm saying? I really haven't considered that this is going to go on the internet, but whatever. It is what it is. People are going to think what people are going to think. So, and that's just what I think. So, anyway, moving on, to the chorus. Really, I don't have a lot to say about either of the choruses. I think it's just basically Carrie describing all the fucking bougie shit that she started doing because she was like viral and making money and, maybe having all the things that she'd probably been working towards for a long time in her career, and like things that she thought like when she finally got there she was going to be fulfilled and she was going to be able to do all this stuff and buy all these things and like make herself happy and etc etc. And like, yeah, essentially the rest of the song is basically just her talking about how when she got all those things, it didn't make her happy, actually made her feel a lot worse. And I think she thought that she was gonna, like, once she got to this kind of like viral fame kind of thing, that, all her problems would be solved and, she'd be happy as Larry and, that would solve everything and she'd like be suddenly better. But yeah, kind of seems like that wasn't the case. Kind of seems like she's talking about being let down a little bit by kind of like getting to this thing that she'd worked towards forever. And, kind of wasn't what she was expecting it to be, and it wasn't as fulfilling and satisfying. It was kind of like maybe fulfilling ego things, but maybe not necessarily heart things, maybe not necessarily soul things. And I kind of feel like based on her kind of like bringing the Becky So Hot kind of Sting era energy into the song, I feel like she's kind of implying that, what she had to do to like actually get to that fame and success and like virality and money, like I don't think it was seeming worth it to her. Like I think, kind of knowing everything that went down, in order for her to get to this point, it kind of seems like she's implying that maybe it wasn't worth it. And there could be like a whole host of reasons why it doesn't feel worth it for her, but based on like her bringing up the tummy area specifically, like that is associated with the solar plexus chakra, which has a lot to do with self-esteem, your boundaries, your willpower, as well as shame, self-doubt, and feeling in control of your own life. So I would guess that most of the reason why it doesn't feel worth it for her would have to do with those things, based on her bringing up that specific area of the body. Like I think, if she felt other things about it, she would have referenced different parts of the body is all I'm saying. Like, I don't think it was necessarily a heart thing. I don't think it was necessarily like a throat thing, a third eye thing, a sacral chakra thing, a root chakra thing. Like, I don't think it was about necessarily like root chakras like to do with like fundamental safety. I don't think it was a sacral thing. Like, I don't think it had anything to do with like her creativity. I think it was like, the things that made it not feel worth it for her were very much coming from the area of the body that she described. So, like shame, self-doubt, maybe crossing her own boundaries, maybe like not acting in alignment with her own values, and maybe, like not feeling in control of her own life, like having things being dictated to her and having her life being controlled rather than her being in charge of her own life. That's like very much solar plexus energy. That would be why, her tummy would hurt. And, like kind of based on kind of where we know the story ends up in terms of like her moving on to be more in control of her own life. Like I do think that the control part is a really big part of like why, what she got out of that situation might not have felt worth it to her.
And she has spoken about evolving self-worth in relation to her career before too.
Do you have a clear list of the things that you want to accomplish after this?
For me, like I think I've always been somebody who like had this definition of success that was always like, oh, I need to achieve this by this date and by this time. And I think that that's something that's just such a lie. And I think it's like really beautiful to have aspirations and dreams and goals. Like obviously, like it's a dream to sell out Madison Square Garden one day and to be nominated for a Grammy. And those are all things that are like on my career bucket list, but at the same time they don't, at the same time it's like my self-worth outside of those things is like so much more. I've like redefined that a little bit, and that's just like happiness and health and wellness and love. And so
so that's what makes me think that the tummy hurting line is mostly about not feeling in control of her own life and being out of integrity with her own sense of self-worth.
You know, like I think the only person who can like really unpack that for us is Carrie. So that's just what I would assume based on, you know, the area of the body that she's referencing, and then also kind of how the story turns out. If, you know, kind of the solution to her not feeling good in her tummy was to, you know, change labels so that she can be more in control and not have to do things a certain way. Like that's just what I'm assuming she's talking about in this song. So yeah. But anyway, like the other thing that I will say about the first chorus is like obviously it's talking about like it's taking us forward a little bit into September when, you know, apparently there was a little bit of contact because, you know, Carrie was telling someone that they wouldn't recognize them. And what I will say about, you know, this chorus specifically, given that it does take place in September, is like that's when Carrie and I had our, like that's when Carrie messaged me on TikTok, was in September, right at the start of September. And I just find it very interesting that she references going on a pussy diet in September, given that when I made my very first YouTube video talking about, you know, like the whole situation with her and I for the first time. But anyway, in that YouTube video, I was talking about how I wasn't sure if she was like in a place in her life where she could, you know, maybe ignore all the pussies that's thrown at her and like actually pursue one person, kind of like get it together, get those fuckboy tendencies like, you know, reined in. Because that was like obviously one of my concerns when I made that original video, that like, you know, maybe she was in her fuckboy era and I didn't want to mess with that. I'm like, if you want to do that, go ahead. But what I'm looking for is I'm looking for like some commitment. I'm looking for someone who, you know, can not take whatever pussy's thrown at them, and actually, you know, be in the work of like pursuing someone and being like kind of that like divine masculine in the kind of like mature kind of power. So I just find it very interesting that she chose to reference September and going on a pussy diet and et cetera, kind of, to me, like, is low-key giving, like, that, you know, maybe I didn't even need to ask in October, she was already doing it. And go back and watch my very first YouTube video. I was, like, talking about all that stuff right at the end if you want to know exactly what I said and what she might be responding to in the song by saying that she went on a pussy diet in September, which, you know, that is kind of a vibe. If she went on a pussy diet, you know, as soon as, you know, she sent me the DM, as soon as we started interacting, like, I don't know, that does kind of make me a little bit happy. I'm not going to lie. Because that's the kind of divine masculine I'm looking for. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the vibe. But anyway, I'm going to come back to the second verse and I'm going to just talk a little bit about references in the next chorus, which is like written obviously a little bit different. But yeah, like I just find it very interesting that she talked about, I felt like I was flying, I felt the stars aligning, because like one of the synchronicities that we experienced at that time was like I'd just made a video about using a sound from Peach PRC, who had sampled Paris Hilton's Stars Are Blind in the song, and I was talking in the video about my crush, who's obviously Carrie. And then Carrie pulls up at Miley Cyrus's New Year's Eve show, and Paris happens to be one of the other performers, and she happens to perform Stars Are Blind. Like, it just felt like very synchronistic. So I just find it very interesting that she like put that stars aligning line in there, because that was again like very early on in our connection. And so like I really remember all of those synchronicities that happened because they just felt really big and really powerful at the time. Like, I think obviously by the time the next year rolled around, I was experiencing synchronicities like extremely constantly in the connection, but like that was one of the early ones, that was one of the strong ones, and that was one of the ones that I was kind of like really realizing like just how, you know, how many synchronicities Carrie and I were experiencing, and like what that kind of meant in terms of our connection, that it was really powerful and it was like something special. So I think that's kind of cute that she like managed to work that into the next chorus. When I saw the Stars Are Blind synchronicity referenced, my little spidey senses went off, and I realized that the context of the song has changed. So at this point in the song, like the context of what she's singing about is different. So the first half of the song is essentially talking about her feeling this misalignment with her career of like being this like viral superstar, but it not necessarily making her feel good because of the way that she had to go about that and what she had to do in terms of the marketing of the Becky So Hot kind of track and things like that. But in the second half of the song, from this point of the song onwards, now the context isn't about the marketing of Becky So Hot. Now it's about the marketing of Antidote and Finding Rewilding, where essentially the pattern's repeating, where, she's having to do all these things to like market her next album, but it's not making her feel better. It's not making her feel like this kind of like superstar. It's making her feel worse about herself. Once my spidey sense went off, that the context that she was talking about had changed, that's when I realised that in the second chorus, she's talking about December, which obviously references my birth month, whereas in the first chorus, she was talking about September, which is obviously the birth month of the album Girl of My Dreams, on which Shannon is a major muse. So and Shannon and Becky, I guess, are major muses. And so that's kind of like the big indicator that she's swapped muses halfway through the song, where the first half of the song she's obviously talking about the situation with Shannon and Becky So Hot that's making her feel away, but the second half of the song she's talking about the situation with me and all the things that she's had to do with marketing Antidote and Finding Rewilding that's not making her feel good. That's why in the second chorus there's a reference to after the glow up I was learning how to grow up, because in my very first YouTube video on this channel, like in the exact same time period that I was talking about, Carrie needing to not go for just whatever pussy's thrown at her if she wants to like pursue things with me, I was also talking about, that being a very mature expression of masculine energy. And so I think that's what she is referencing when she was talking about I was learning how to grow up, especially given that she just talked about, going on a pussy diet. I think like her putting this part into the second half of the song is like talking about how, essentially like following that same storyline, that same plot in terms of like, we obviously met officially in September. Like we'd had interactions from July, but we met officially in September. And she obviously went on her pussy diet. Then in October, I was very explicit about that's kind of the vibe. And, I'm looking for that mature masculine that can do that. And then, by December, like it seems like she was learning how to grow up. She was in that work. And then the other thing about this second chorus is she's talking about having wet dreams, which I think there'll be things that will come out on the Finding Rewilding album possibly about some dreams and things. So I feel like that's a reference that's a little bit maybe, to be explored still. But spidey senses, again, going off, I think there's going to be more information about that later. And then the thing about her waking up on the stage with Miley as well is that Miley and I are born 2 weeks apart and we have extremely similar birth charts. Like basically our birth chart is the same, except like we have opposite moon signs because we were born 2 weeks apart. So I have an exalted Taurus moon and she has a Scorpio moon in detriment, in fall. And so, our charts are very similar. Also, I'm a Virgo rising and Miley's a Taurus rising. So we both have the same element on each of the houses in our chart. Like we're just very astrologically similar. Like if I was to say that my chart was very similar to a celebrity, I would say that it's Miley. The only things that's really different about our charts is like obviously the moon signs, and she's born during the day and I'm born at night. So, I have a really strong moon in my chart. She has a really strong Sagittarius sun, and that's basically the main way we're different. She's very sunny. We basically have the same chart, but she's got the sunny version, I've got the night version. And I think it's the change of context in the song, like now talking about kind of the me situation, the me marketing situation instead of the Becky So Hot marketing situation, that has led her to write the line about thinking that if she got this high, she'd like it. Because I think with the marketing of Becky So Hot, I think she might have expected to kind of feel a little bit bad, because obviously there was more narratives around kind of like her being the villain during that marketing strategy. And so I think maybe she might not have realized why like better felt worse in the first part of the song, just because based on the like context, based on the situation. But then in the second chorus, like it seems like she's more realized in the sense of like, you know, I always thought that if I felt this high, I'd like it. Like I think, you know, the context changing was what allowed her to realize that, you know, she still felt just as bad, even though the context was different. Like now she didn't have, you know, all the drama with Becky So Hot to blame on her feeling worse. Like she couldn't chalk it up to like, I just feel guilty or, you know, blah, 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 blah. Like maybe, you know, it'll pass and I will feel better and these things will fulfill me. I think when, you know, she's talking, when the context has changed and now she's talking about, you know, because at the time, like her and I were not stressed at all. Like we did not have any tension. Like, you know, she should have felt good because, you know, there was a bitch that she liked. She was like performing with Miley. Like there was no reason for her to still feel worse in the second context when she was kind of having to repeat the pattern and do the same marketing strategies for Antidote and Finding Rewilding as what she had to do with the Becky So Hot era to like make money and make things go viral and yada yada. Like she still felt bad about it. And I think the change in context is why. Because I think, you know, if she was still like talking about the Becky So Hot era in this part of the song, I don't think she would have had that self-realized moment of like, why do I still feel like, why do I still feel worse? Like I think knowing that the context has changed makes it very clear why now she can see it, because, you know, all the circumstances were going in her favor. Like she was no longer going to be this bad guy marketer. Might have like, or at least at the time she didn't think she was going to be made out to be the bad guy marketer. So like, why does she still feel shit? Like, I hope that makes sense. It's making sense to me that, you know, the context has changed. And so that's what helped her realize that it was, you know, like she couldn't blame it on just being guilty or whatever. Like, actually, this is not a good situation. It's not aligned and I need to actually change my situation because I still don't feel good. I think that's why this second post-chorus kind of hits different too, because like the first post-chorus is just like, yeah, better feels worse, and she's kind of a bit whatever about it, because I think she was kind of not expecting to feel overly good at the time, like just based on everything that was going down, like kind of the context of the situation. But I think, you know, when the context changed in the sense of like now it's about the me marketing strategy, like then, you know, things are like being things are illuminated to her as like, you know, like I'm doing this job that, you know, should be so fulfilling, should have me smiling, but I'm crying on the inside. Like I'm having to act like I'm fine when I'm not. Like I'm upset, like, you know, I don't want to be doing this, but, you know, I kind of have to, it's my job. Like, you know, like I'm kind of like faking that I'm okay when I'm not, which, you know, does make me feel a little bit guilty about saying what I said in my Errors of Us music video reaction, because obviously I did kind of say, to be fair, I like clarified it with, you know, like based on your action, it seems like you're fine and I'm really not fine. So I did say that it's just like, it was how it was appearing, which, you know, obviously she's talking about appearing fine when she's not in this song. But yeah, I do feel a little bit bad about saying that. Because, you know, like obviously she was not fine. I knew she wasn't fine. Like I knew she wasn't fine, you know, since before the world knew she was sick. I knew she was sick before the world knew she was sick. I just knew things were not good. Like I knew she was not fine. To be fair, like I was very rattled with the Errors of Us situation. So I don't know. Like I do feel a little bit bad about it, just knowing how, you know, upset that she's been crying, dying on the inside, having to pretend she's fine when she's not. Like, yeah, like obviously that was the situation. And yeah, like, yeah, that's the situation. She's been having to pretend she's fine when she's not, been having to smile and pretend she's enjoying, you know, things when actually she's crying and dying on the inside and actually just pretending that she is good when she's not. So yeah, I think that's also why this second post-chorus hits different too, because it's just like, I think it's a bit more of like a realized agony of like, oh, like this situation's not good. Like I'm not where I'm meant to be. Like I'm not aligned with what's aligned with me kind of thing. So yeah, like, and yeah, I think she was just in a situation where she was having to act more fine than what she was. I think the other reason why this second post-chorus might hit a little bit different is because, you know, I think with the Becky So Hot situation, with the marketing involved in that, you know, I think maybe it might have been less agonizing given that kind of like that song was like about her pain. Like she was already kind of in a pain place with it, like where she felt hurt. Whereas with the me situation, like obviously I didn't sign up for things. Like I wasn't like, you know, it's not like I'd been in this full relationship with a musician and kind of like knew that that was probably what was going to happen, that she was going to like write about me after the relationship ended. Like I was just in a very different boat. Like, and then also like having to stay apart from me, which was like hurting me. Like even though back then, like it wasn't really that big of a deal, like it was still hurting me. Like I think that was just different. Like I think she kind of like maybe went from, you know, maybe feeling a little bit justified with the way she went about things, which, you know, I'm not saying that she wasn't, to like maybe feeling a lot less justified with what she was doing, because, you know, I hadn't done anything to hurt her. Like I think that's also maybe why this post-chorus hits a little bit different too, and why she was maybe crying more on the inside, because I think, you know, maybe there was like an extra layer of like kind of hurt or guilt, or, you know, like maybe feeling like I maybe deserved it a little bit less, which I don't know. Look, I think that's, you know, that's like a conversation for another day, but yeah, I just think the context was different, and I think that's maybe why the second post-chorus, you know, hits a little bit different. I do just want to circle back to the second verse, because I think this is the point of the song that's kind of like maybe making it a little bit more clear exactly what the song is about, because I think like while on a surface level, this can come across as maybe like a little bit, you know, again, kind of painting herself as the villain of like, you know, I made her go viral, I'm her idol, and like I'm out here buying new cars with the money, and, you know, not taking the high road. Like I think, you know, she's kind of painting herself as the villain again, but at the same time, I think it's also supposed to be double meaning and kind of like essentially having a little bit of a kind of like poking fun a little bit at the situation, like as in the broader context situation, because like, you know, like obviously the reason why Carrie was in the situation with Becky, why she was in the situation with me, was because her label has an affinity for virality. They will do anything for marketing and virality, even if they're like kind of making up scenarios that aren't actually real, for the sake of like going viral on TikTok. So I think that's kind of like the second meaning of this second verse, like, your girlfriend never thanked me for making her go viral, like kind of poking fun at the fact that, you know, she signed to a label that's like so obsessed with going viral and would just think that, you know, everyone would want that. You know, like personally, I didn't want that. I don't think Becky wanted that either, you know, and I think that's kind of like Carrie poking fun of like, yeah, this label, like, you know, loves making people go viral, and they probably think that, you know, whoever goes viral will think it's a fucking blessing. But, you know, I don't think that's necessarily the case. And I think that's kind of what the kind of shadowy hidden meaning of this second verse is about. Especially because it's got that sad and spiral line. Like it kind of, to me, feels like, you know, they made Carrie go viral. They made her an idol, and all it did was make her sad and spiral. And I think, you know, that's kind of the implication as well, that like, you know, maybe her label, you know, would have thought that Becky would have been eating up going viral, but potentially Becky also didn't want to be an idol and also got sad and spiraled over like being made to go viral. And, you know, like, I would say that that's accurate about my situation too. Like, I didn't ask to go viral. Not that I have gone viral, but like I wasn't asking to like be thrown into this marketing campaign. And I've been sad and spiraling this whole time as well. Like, that's kind of what I feel like Carrie's getting at by kind of like putting those two things together in terms of, oh, three things, I guess, the viral, idol, and spiral. Like, it just seems like she's, maybe poking fun at the fact that, there are people out here that, like eat up like money and capitalism and, think it's the best thing in the world to go viral and to be an idol, even though, you're probably going to hurt some people and just end up sad and spiraling about the fact that you've either, hurt people or been misaligned with your values or, done something kind of shady in order to go viral, like done something sketchy, like sell a fake storyline or whatever it is. Like, that's what I feel like this second verse is actually about. And yeah, like, but at least she gets a new car out of it. You know what I'm saying? Not that she was taking the high road to fucking get the car, so she may as well not take the high road after she gets it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of the vibe. It's kind of like, I just feel like in the second verse, she's saying like literally everything about this situation is shitty. And like that's kind of the vibe as far as I can tell. So I like the kind of like double meaning of the second verse as well. I think it's kind of like a little bit more poking fun at like the powers that be. And like kind of what they're about and how misaligned it is with Carrie. And yeah, I think that's like a very clever way to do it as well. Yeah, that's why I think the song's very well written. There's lots of like kind of double meaning in things and some of it's very clever and like borderline kind of like, I don't know, like not shady, but like, I think maybe looking for justice or like retribution or something. Like, there's a little bit of like a justice, retribution, rebellion kind of like undertone to it that I really enjoy. So yeah, that's why I really like the song. That's why I think the song's really clever. And they're like kind of like all the main points that I'm seeing in the song, in the lyrics of the song, as I'm like reading through everything. I'm going to be real with you. I haven't actually listened to the song properly. So I don't actually know how it sounds. I decided to read the lyrics first so that I knew what I was getting myself into. And as soon as I saw all the like smiling on the outside, crying on the inside stuff, I'm like, I don't think I can listen to it. I don't want to hear her being sad, like as much as I like got on the internet in the Eras of Us time and was just like, I don't see from your action that you're feeling a way about this. It kind of seems like you're fine. Like, I don't want her to be not fine. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I'm sure the song's a bop. Like, I don't actually know the tempo of the song. I don't know if it's, kind of fast or slow. I'm kind of feeling like it'll probably be fast if it's a lead single. I don't think it'll be like a slow song. But I don't actually know how it sounds. You know what I'm saying? Because I just don't want to hear any pain in her voice. And I just don't think she would have sung with no emotion. You know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah, like, I'm going to be real with you. I'm literally just judging everything based off lyrics. I'll listen to it properly one day. I think just right now it's just a little bit too emotional for me. It's too intense. Like, it's too, like, I just don't want to hear her in pain in any way. And I kind of hope it is a bop because I think, sometimes the more painful undertones of the lyrics get hidden in the bops so that it maybe won't be as confronting, won't be as kind of hard for me to hear. But yeah, like, that's the vibe. I haven't actually listened to it. I've just read the lyrics because I just don't want to hear her in pain or struggling or, like, as much as I, didn't want her to pretend, like, I don't know. It's just complicated. It's not personal for me. It's like, I can't separate I try to separate the personal stuff, but there's only so much separating the personal stuff I can do. So that's kind of the vibe. I will listen to it eventually. But right now I just don't think I can handle hearing her be upset about, the situation and talking about smiling on the outside and crying on the inside. That'll just make me too upset. So I'm just not going to do that to myself. For now, that's all I have to say about the song. I think I will be back to talk more about the album and the project at large, and like all the things that, you know, I now kind of know about the project based on, you know, the direction Carrie's gone in when it comes to the tracks that she's released as singles, and, you know, kind of like anything and all the other intuitions that I might be having about the project. I think I'm going to come on and do kind of like a bit of an update video of like what I think about the album so far. And, you know, because obviously I've got on here and kind of said bits and pieces, and, you know, at some points I've been very upset about things and like maybe said some things that, you know, was true at the time, but maybe not true now. So yeah, I will come back and like talk some more and do another video probably very, very soon, given that we only have about 2 weeks left until the album drops, to talk more about the project. But for now, that's like all I have to say, and they're my thoughts on the Doing Better video. But until I'm back again, ciao.